Welcome to the 19th Century Charitable Association in Oak Park, where it is our vision to be a dynamic cultural center for community learning. Good afternoon. I am Judy Eckberg, Chair of the Social Science Program Committee, responsible for today's program, as part of our mission to strengthen our community through learning, giving, and sharing our landmark building. Today's program is entitled Love Under Fire, the story of Bertha and Potter Palmer. Our presenter, Amelia Dellos, is a lifelong Chicagoan, an award-winning writer, and a filmmaker. She holds an MFA in creative writing from Columbia College, Chicago, and has taught writing and rhetoric at Roosevelt University and her alma mater. Recently, she became the managing editor of Unwoven Literary and Arts magazine. She attended the Kenyon College Writers Workshop. Her work has appeared in Spill Words, Streetlit, Big Shoulders Press, Allium, a journal of poetry and prose, PBS, and Amazon Prime. I am very happy to introduce Amelia Dellos as our very special guest presenter today.
Thank you so much for having me here today. It's truly an honor to be with you and share this film, Labor of Love. And I also work at the Downtown Oak Park Business Alliance. That's my day job. I'm the marketing director there. So you'll probably see me around doing marketing things in Downtown Oak Park as well. To give you a little bit of background, when I started this film, my daughter, Elena, who's 19, she is also one of your scholarship recipients. She was about 2-3 years old, and it took me about 5 years to finish it. And it really was a labor of love. It started out as a feature film about the Chicago fire, a love story with Bertha and Potter. I wrote a script. I sat down with a producer who said, "You have a lovely script, but you're an unknown screenwriter. No one is going to give you $100 million to write an epic love story set against the Chicago fire." Kind of took some wind out of my sails. I had met with a producer over at PBS, and he said, if you turn this into a documentary, I will air it. He's like, "I'm not going to give you any money to make the film, but I will air it for you." So I'd already done so much research at this point, and kind of how it worked, it was anytime anyone said, "You need to go talk to that person," I would always go talk to that person. And I met with Peter Hawley, who's now part of the defunct, it was a film school in Chicago, for-profit. It went out of business. But he said, "I'll give you a sound guy, I'll give you a camera guy, and you go just shoot this film." So we did, so I did it without any kind of money. We did the interviews, I did all the research, got everything put together, shot it, and then I came across a financier who was obsessed with Bertha Palmer, got married at the Palmer House Hotel, and had some deep pockets and was really passionate. So from that point, we moved into post-production and then eventually completed the film. It did air on PBS. I believe it still airs at the hotel on their station. And then we also were a finalist for Women in Film Miami, I believe. So this movie is about 10 years old now. And it's a part of a production company that I have with my husband, which is Cornbread Films. And through Cornbread Films, we've done a political documentary called Red, White, and Blue, A Tale of Two Americas, where we went around the Midwest and interviewed people about their political beliefs and why they believe what they believe. We completed this documentary, and then we also have a feature-length film other plans that went straight to DVD or went straight to streaming. And we're currently working on a couple new projects. I'm working on my second book. I'm working on a feature film about Jane Byrne and her run-up to her mayoral election, and kind of how that all happened. And that, not a documentary, feature film, biography. My husband's working on some horror projects. He loves horror. I'm not a horror fan, but he enjoys horror. And then that is everything that we're working on right now. And then, like Judith said, I'm managing director of a literary magazine that I started with my cohort from Columbia College, and that is Unwoven Literary Arts Magazine. Please give that a read. And so that's everything in a nutshell. I look forward to answering all your questions afterwards. I'm love Chicago, have lots to talk about. We were talking about whether or not Miss O'Leary started the fire or not. So I'm gonna leave that out there. The film will answer that question. We'll talk a little bit about Bertha Palmer and sort of her early roots. Although she wouldn't call herself a feminist or a suffragette, I think she probably held a lot of those beliefs. Her relationship with Potter, the hotel, the Columbian Exposition, so lots of fun historical things. So without further ado, this is Love Under Fire, and thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you on the other side.
Bertha Honoré Palmer was a woman ahead of her time. She wasn't just another 19th century wealthy, well-dressed socialite. Bertha spent her life fighting for and establishing the foundation for women's rights. Early on in her marriage to her husband Potter Palmer, her character was tested during the Great Chicago Fire. The summer of 1871 had been one of the longest, driest, and hottest summers in Chicago's history.
The city was incredibly dry, so you add sort of heavy winds and dry conditions and a city made of wood, and you've got a recipe for disaster.
In the city of Chicago, from October 1st through October 7th, there had been 28 fires reported.
The Chicago fire could have been fire number 29 of that month.
But it wasn't just fire number 29, it was the fire. It was the fire that would go down in history as the worst fire to ever blaze through Chicago. The Great Chicago Fire raged on for 31 hours. It started on Sunday, October 8th at 8:45 p.m. and ended in the early morning hours of Tuesday, October 10th. The Great Chicago Fire brought the city of Chicago to its knees. The fire destroyed the city's infrastructure by burning through 17,500 buildings, 2,000 acres, 120 miles of sidewalks, and 73 miles of road. And even worse, the fire had left 90,000 Chicagoans homeless and killed 300 people.
The fire burned sort of southwest to northeast. The burn district, what we look at today, is basically about Roosevelt to the south, approximately Halsted to the west, the lake to the east, and about Fullerton Avenue to the north, which is encompassing a pretty large area, about 1.5 miles east to west and about 3 miles north to south.
For Bertha Palmer and her husband Potter, the fire dismantled their lives. Potter had spent his life living and working in Chicago, only to see his life's work literally go up in smoke in just 31 hours. At the time of the fire, his fortune, valued at $7 million, was tied up in his 32 buildings, which burned to the ground during the fire. Just 13 days before the fire, Potter had completed his wedding gift for his young bride, Bertha, the Palmer House Hotel. Potter's wedding gift was valued at $3.5 million, and before the fire hit, the newlyweds were preparing to move into their new home. early 1900s, Potter Palmer was considered the unofficial mayor of Chicago, even though he was originally from the East Coast.
Potter originally came from upstate New York, in an area called Potter's Hollow, believe it or not. His father married a Miss Potter, and they had 7 children. He was the middle of the 7, and they named him Potter Palmer.
Potter was born on May 26, 1826. He was raised a Quaker and came from a long line of gentlemen farmers. But Potter wasn't interested in farming the land. He was interested in commerce, in retail. And soon after running a small dry goods store in the East, he heard the call of the West. And like many travelers heading to California, he stopped in Chicago. Potter was so taken in with the spirit of the city, he decided to stay.
When he got here, he liked what he saw. It was a burgeoning town. Business was growing, the population was increasing.
1850s Chicago wasn't exactly a modern-day metropolis.
You need to understand that Chicago is nothing more than a Midwest outpost. You know, it wasn't clean. There were mud roads. It wasn't a pleasant place to live in.
Yet Potter saw something more than just dirt and mud. He saw industry. He saw potential. He saw a city poised to be one of the greatest cities in the world, and he wanted to be a part of it. After the Civil War, Potter made a considerable amount of money buying and selling cotton and wool. Ever the retailer and entrepreneur, he continued to grow his dry goods business. But Potter's greatest retail legacy was the Palmer method. Potter revolutionized retail by lowering prices by buying directly from manufacturers, wholesalers, and importers. He also guaranteed a full refund if the customer wasn't satisfied. And his store also became famous for its attractive window displays and advertisements.
Potter Palmer actually started the whole concept of customer service. And he instituted quite a few things. Bargain basement, and the biggest was the credit and liberal exchange policy.
In 1885, Potter sold Potter Palmer and Company to Marshall Field and Levi Leiter. Potter lent them his name and his credit, and the store was called Field, Palmer, and Leiter. In 1881, it became Marshall Field and Company, and over time, many of Potter's methods have been falsely attributed to Field.
When Marshall Field and Levi Leiter took over the business, they abolished the credit and liberal exchange policy because they didn't think it was good business, and finally realized they had to reinstate it.
He was the first one ever to allow women to come in and exchange or get a refund. And everybody thought that was just a crazy thing to do.
He came up with this idea, if the lady's not happy, give her money back, make her happy.
Bertha Honoré was born in Louisville, Kentucky on May 22, 1846. She was the second of 6 children. And in 1855, Bertha's father, H.H. Honoré, moved his family to Chicago.
Mr. Honoré was very taken with the unique positioning of this area called Chicago in the center of the universe and brought his family up here.
Like Potter, H.H. saw the potential of this untamed city.
Bertha's father was very much involved in real estate in Chicago. And the two men, Bertha's father and Potter, became involved in various business activities.
Little did Potter know that a dinner invitation from H.H. at the Honoré home would change the trajectory of his life.
I think they met in the most traditional way, because at the time that they met, she was 13 years old, and it was at a family dinner.
Stories have it that Potter, upon first meeting Bertha, many years younger than he was, that he stated that he was going to marry her.
At the age of 38, Potter was worth $7 million. He was a success, but that success had come at a high price. He had sacrificed his health, working long hours. On doctor's orders to rest, Potter decided to take time off and travel to Europe. During that same time, Bertha headed east to Georgetown to continue her education.
Well, there were many women at the time that were educated at home with governesses. So she was unusual that she attended grammar school in Chicago, a private school, and then traveled to Washington, D.C. to attend school.
In 1868, Potter returned from Europe and was considered a very eligible bachelor, and Bertha had become an accomplished young woman.
He asked to take her to church and afterwards to tea. And then he began to send to the honoree home presents, obviously for her, but to demonstrate to her parents that he was a man of means.
Potter, even with his wealth, was the dark horse in the race to win Bertha's hand. Their courtship lasted almost 2 years. After Potter sold off his interests in his retail business, he turned his full attention to his real estate developments. And while courting Bertha, he started to build the crown jewel of his real estate empire, the Palmer House Hotel.
It was essentially built as a wedding present for her. And I don't think she was prepared to hear what Potter was about to say to her. He said to her, I want it to be a business, I want it to be a home, but Bertha, I want it to be a gift for my bride. Who are you going to marry, Potter? I hope it's you.
On July 29, 1870, Bertha finally said yes. And at age 21, Bertha Honoré wed the 44-year-old Potter Palmer in the living room at her parents' home, followed by a wedding reception for 700 people. Fresh from their European honeymoon, the Palmers prepared to move into their new home, the Palmer House Hotel. Just 13 days after it was completed, the Palmer House Hotel burned down in the Chicago fire. Bertha's wedding gift, valued at $3.5 million, was decimated. Just a pile of rubble and ash, along with the rest of Palmer's 32 buildings and a fortune valued at $7 million.
I believe Potter was shell-shocked. He had lost the very first Palmer House after it was only open 13 days. The city was literally laid to its knees. Earlier, Bertha had made a vow through her marriage vows to him, sickness and in health and richer for poorer, and she took them very seriously.
Devastated because he had lost everything in the fire, Palmer considered returning to New York. But his young bride convinced him otherwise, saying to him, "Mr. Palmer, it's the duty of every Chicagoan to stay here and to help to rebuild this stricken city."
She said, "Oh, Mr. Palmer, yes, you're going to do it." And I think that was a very important moment in history for both of them.
And with that charge, Palmer began to not only rebuild his fortune, he led the way to rebuild Chicago. Palmer secured a $1.7 million loan. At that time, it was the largest single loan ever made to a single person.
Palmer played a large role in, obviously, the city investing in State Street, investing in his own properties, investing in sort of other commercial buildings along the city.
But what Potter really had foremost in his mind was fireproofing his new hotel.
The first thing he did was to charge John Van Osdale, who was the architect of the first building, "Can you build me a building that won't burn?"
In 1875, the Palmer House reopened. Palmer, so secure that his new hotel was fireproof, he even dared his guests to set fire to it. No one ever took Potter up on his offer. The Palmers had an unconventional marriage, even by today's standards. It wasn't what you would consider your typical Victorian marriage, in which the man was the patriarch and the woman was submissive, receding into the background. Potter was more than happy to let Bertha shine in the spotlight.
You find a lot of the very successful men in the late 19th century marrying much younger women. But what was most certain is that they did love each other.
According to Bertha, she stated that husband and wife should stand side by side, the fine qualities of each supplementing and assisting those of the other.
They spent a considerable amount of time with each other. At the end of every business day, Potter was known to sit and chat with Bertha about the business activities of the Palmer House and other activities he was involved with.
Bertha Palmer was one of the best-dressed women of her day. You could easily compare her to Jackie Kennedy Onassis. Bertha worked very closely with Charles Frederick Worth of the House of Worth in Paris. He was the father of haute couture. Bertha was involved in every aspect of the production and design of her clothing. She selected colors, materials, and over the years was able to refine her style and wasn't afraid to push the fashion envelope.
Bertha Honoré Palmer was probably the most fashionable in every sense of the word woman at the time in the 1890s in Chicago in the early 20th century.
She often selected clothing for specific events she was attending. She did not want to downplay the fact that she was from a prairie town and was even referred to as the Princess of the Prairie. In fact, she chose to highlight it. At the Paris exhibition of 1900, to represent the Midwest, she had Worth design a corn husk pattern on her dress.
She dressed the part. I think she liked to dress the part, but she also knew that that part would get her into being able to have conversations with people who could make a difference. Instead of coming in loose clothing and screaming loudly, she walked in with the finesse of a proper 19th century woman and was able to get to the King of England, the kings and queens of royalty around the world, and really then make a greater difference than some of her contemporaries who had been fighting for decades for the similar cause. And so dress played a very important role in her legacy.
Bertha believed that women could do and achieve anything that men could, and she dedicated her life to helping underprivileged working women and their children.
She didn't believe in rough tactics, and she was every day the diplomat. So she thought we lived in a world in which men and women could work together to solve their problems.
Yes, Bertha believed in equal rights for women, but she did not identify with the suffragette movement.
They were more radical than Bertha. Bertha was more conservative than they. She was not what we would call a feminist. But she was terribly concerned about the role of women and their situation. She wanted that improved.
Bertha wasn't a suffragette, but she was a social working socialite.
That might seem a little odd, but it was very new for the wealthy class to take great care in causes that were not related to their class. A lot of people, it took them decades to feel like, well, why should we care? The poor are the poor, they can take care of themselves. And she was one of the city's first women to really take an active role in changing people's perceptions.
Early on in her marriage, Bertha knew she wanted to be much more than simply a lady who lunches. And she found a way to make a difference through her work with local area women's clubs.
In the 1870s, there began to be a number of women's clubs all over the country. They were the opportunity for women to grow intellectually, to take part of the civil and social scene, to respond to civic problems.
Because of her participation in local women's clubs, Bertha worked with the Jane Addams Hull House. She helped to set up kindergartens and helped the milliners to set up a union.
She was instrumental in helping form the Chicago Women's Business Club. This was in 1888. So is this a woman ahead of her time? Yes. She was also involved in the Women's Club And this club doesn't exist today. But it was unusual because women were involved with social issues, and there were society women and working women as part of this organization.
Although Bertha played the part of the social working socialite, her most famous and influential role was that of the president of the Board of Lady Managers for the 1893 Columbian Exposition, also known as the Chicago World's Fair. Her first job as president of the Lady Managers was to manage the architect responsible for planning the Chicago World's Fair. Bertha butted heads more than once with Daniel Burnham.
She was very insistent that the women have their own building because she was interested in supplying many items to be displayed. Mrs. Potter Palmer and the lady managers decided to host a competition to choose a woman architect. And that is when Sophia Hayden, a 21-year-old and the first architectural graduate from the School of MIT, came and won the election.
Bertha realized that the lady managers needed the money to build the women's building, so she traveled to Washington, D.C. to ask the government for the necessary funds. Bertha was the first woman in history to petition the government for funds that were then used to promote women and their work.
And she was able to bring together women of 41 nations to display work, quality work. But she also contacted the patent office because she wanted to provide a space for women that had recently invented. There actually were 3,000 patents by women in 1891.
But according to a quote from Bertha's speech that she gave at the opening of the fair, the real achievement was even more important than the discovery of Columbus, which we are gathered together to celebrate, is the fact that the general government has just discovered women.
The spotlight that was placed on women, women's work, women's lives around the world, not just in Chicago, really helped advance some of the forward momentum that women felt in the rights for gaining suffrage and rights for equality. Primarily just getting people to understand that women did work, women did have something to contribute, was decades ahead of her time. And so she played a very important role in establishing some of the advancements that women felt early in the 20th century.
The art collection that the Palmers amassed during their marriage is now the foundation for the Art Institute of Chicago's world-renowned Impressionist collection.
She was considered a force. Besides Mrs. Havemeyer in New York, there were no other important American collectors of modern art. There are 36 core paintings that are largely still up in the galleries today. And this was her favorite painting, and we know it was framed, pretty substantially. We've replaced the frame, but even then, to imagine that she took this to London, to Paris, to Newport. She hung it in her bedroom wherever she was.
Potter's health was on the decline, and on May 4th, 1902, Potter died of heart failure with Bertha by his side. Even in his will, he treated Bertha as his equal.
Typically, families like that with a lot of money, the money was left to the male heirs, not to the wife. This was completely changed with Potter, where he left all of the money, the estate, and all responsibility to Bertha. In Potter's will, one of the last wills, boldly printed and underlined, it stated that Potter wanted to leave a sum of, I believe it was about $1 million, to Bertha's next husband, which is, who does that? And then in the will, he writes boldly again, because he will need it, and underlines it.
In the end, Potter's bequest was unnecessary because Bertha was so devoted to him that she never remarried. After Potter's death, Bertha left Chicago and lived abroad in London and Paris. As a wealthy widow, she moved in very exclusive social circles. Eventually, she moved back to the States and bought land in Sarasota, Florida, where she gained a reputation as a very savvy businesswoman and doubled the fortune Palmer left her.
And in the following decade after his death, Bertha was able to take that very large sum of money and double it through her own investments, both in Florida with Sarasota and then in various investments that she had in Chicago as well.
Mrs. Potter Palmer was probably one of the greatest businesswomen that ever lived.
After a very private 2-year battle with breast cancer, Bertha died in Florida on May 5, 1918. She passed away a day after the 16th anniversary of Potter's death. Her body was returned to Chicago, where large crowds gathered outside the Palmer Castle to mourn her death. The Palmers were both laid to rest at the now historic Graceland Cemetery. Bertha was a wife, a mother, a socialite, a social worker, a businesswoman. But first and foremost, she was a woman ahead of her time.
So when I talk about Mrs. Potter Palmer and what was her greatest legacy, she was a great supporter of women and children in 3 areas: education, wages, and working conditions.
Yes, she had privilege, and yes, she had wealth, and yes, she had great resources, but she never really felt that she was better than any woman who had a 3rd-grade education.
In the end, Bertha explains her life's work when she stated, "But the sentimentalist again exclaims, 'Would you have woman step down from her pedestal in order to enter practical life?' Yes, 1,000 times yes. If we can really find, after a careful search, any women mounted upon pedestals, we should willingly ask them to step down in order that they may meet and help to uplift their sisters. Freedom and justice for all are infinitely more to be desired than pedestals for a few."
Very simply, what you spell cornbread, B-R-E-D.
Yes.
How come?
Because when my dad was from the Quad Cities, and my husband is from Burlington, Iowa, and when he met my dad's family, my dad had already passed, and they said, "Oh, you're cornbread, just like us." So they kind of and it was sort of like a family joke. So that's why it's cornbread, like bread on corn, not cornbread that you eat.
Right.
Yeah.
I have one other question.
Of course.
Other plans, where can that be seen?
That is on, I believe, Amazon Prime. It's a romantic comedy starring Jamie Kennedy, the comedian.
Right at the end, it mentioned that she was a mother. Could you say something about her children?
She had 2 sons. One of the sons, I believe, got into politics in Chicago. I think after her and Palmer kind of had like the epitome of what happened to that family. And I think as the generations kind of went down, not a lot of like kind of Kennedy-esque shenanigans, I guess you could say, probably came up. Her niece did marry General Grant, President Grant's son, I believe. And she did take her nieces off to England and kind of tried to marry them to like the Downton Abbey type thing. I think that did happen with some of her nieces, but I'm not as educated on that part, like what happened to the other Palmers after this generation. But she did have 2 sons. Yeah, like I said, I think the one ran for politics. Nothing really exciting happened.
How did she get interested in Impressionist paintings?
Sure.
And did they come to her, or did she go to them? Because that's a whole collection at the Art Institute.
Yeah, so she went to them. She traveled and met with them and had she was working with a art dealer. I do not remember the art dealer's name, but the art dealer kind of connected her with that. But at the time, we think of Impressionist art now. At the time, it was extremely risky for her to be collecting this art. They were really considered outsider artists for their time period. They were going against that neoclassical art and architecture. And so, you can say she was just savvy in that area as well, because she sort of discovered what we now consider some of the greatest artists of our time. I love that she traveled with the Renoir and had it in all of wherever she stayed. I kind of love that detail about her. But yes, she was, we owe her a great deal. Palmer also was on the board of the Art Institute, so when they built the Art Institute, he was one of the board members as well. So,
besides the Art Institute and her 2 children, who else benefited from her legacy? Money, financially.
Financially, that's a great question. I never really went through the her actual will. I did look at Palmer's will, which is why we have that whole thing about giving the $1 million to her next husband. She did, during her life, dedicate a lot of time to the Milners, setting up penny milk programs, setting up kindergartens, that type of thing. So.
This fall, a group of us went to see the Glessner House.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a bedroom there that Potter used to stay in.
Mm-hmm.
And Potter Palmer used to stay in. And I just wonder, how were the contemporaries relating to them as a couple? She had a lot of power, but she wasn't a suffragette. Who are some of their friends?
That's a great question. They did entertain anyone who was coming through Chicago, they would entertain. So she was hanging out with King Edward. You had the Fields, you had all the wealthy, the Montgomerys, you had all those very, very wealthy families in Chicago. And then anytime anyone kind of came through, they would stay at her castle, at the mansion. So what was interesting, that one, I don't know if you caught it, but it was a clip and it showed Bertha hosts labor union people and socialites and the wealthy in one home. So I think that's kind of what really intrigues me about her, is that yes, they did travel in these circles, but that also were bringing people together. And I believe, to the question about what she did with her will, I know that she did leave money to the people who worked on her staff. She did leave money to those people who helped her run the castle and that kind of thing too. So yeah, royalty, any of the wealthy in Chicago, General Grant, who then became President Grant. So yeah.
Thank you. This was very interesting.
Oh,
but years ago, I was in, I think it was outside of Sarasota, that Bertha Palmer had a ranch.
Yes.
And she had like a park that you could tour and visit. And I remember hearing that she, when you talk about what a wonderful businesswoman she was, she did a lot in studying cattle and developing ways. So it was really interesting to hear that side of her also.
Yeah.
And is that still open in Florida?
I think it is.
Okay.
I feel like they probably do a better job in Sarasota and kind of honoring her and her memory than we might actually do here in Chicago. I think she gets lost in our history quite a bit. I'm always interested in lost women in history. And yeah, I believe she was really into sort of like early Western cowboy culture and studied cattle and was breeding cattle and was like bringing them in from like Wyoming and things like that to like farm them. Yeah, it's kind of an odd turn, right? She's hanging out, buying impressionist art, hanging out with royalty, and then cattle farming. So, yeah, I mean, she go kind of full circle, right?
Where was the castle? And I take it it's one of the many that's been torn down.
It is, and oh God, that's a great question. I believe now it's like a high rise in the Gold Coast. I don't know the exact address. It was part of the early 60s before we really started looking at historical preservation in the United States. You know, I think it's really interesting when you look at like Pleasant Home and over here in Oak Park and all the different, it only ended up with the Park District and, you know, just the costs, and that home was comparatively smaller than the castle that Bertha and Potter built. So yeah, I think it was part of, the woman who invested in my film, I should have brought them. I have tiles from her home. So people did kind of go in and take things, and I have floor tiles from her house. But yeah, it's unfortunate. It just kind of a part of that whole, before we started saying like, oh, we need to preserve these things, right? Yeah. I can't imagine how much money it would cost to upkeep, but yeah, it is sad.
I believe I heard once that one of the reasons that she acquired that Impressionist collection was because she was friends with Mary Cassatt. Is that right?
She was friends with Mary Cassatt. There are some lovely letters between Bertha and Mary in the library at the Art Institute that I was lucky enough to read. She had hired Mary to do large-scale art pieces for the women's exhibition, and they did have a friendship and a correspondence. I believe that probably that was part of it, but she also worked with an art dealer. She had traveled, she had met these artists. I think it was all just sort of taking in all that culture of the time as well.
What did they maintain an interest in the Palmer House Hotel?
I believe the Palmer House Hotel was eventually sold to the Hilton family, and that probably happened, I think, I'm not really sure when the Hiltons took over. They've held a stake in it for a really long time. I don't think either of their sons were involved in the hotel at all.
Yeah, well, I was wondering if Mrs. Palmer had any say in running the hotel, or if that was
While
all
they were
separate.
together?
While they were together.
Oh, yeah,
Before the castle, because you said they moved in there first.
Yeah, they definitely lived in the hotel. They have dishes and plates and silverware and glassware that she actually purchased and bought. There's a funny story about how she would like kind of come and go, and she was very was very public facing, and he had like a little office with a little window, and he would kind of just do his work and peek out and watch her like come and go. But I think, you know, she was from Louisville, she was from a Southern family, very much hospitality. I think there was this mix of like Southern belle with this East Coast education, and kind of all kind of came together. And, you know, I heard the groans with the age difference, and I get it, it doesn't age very well. But I think even though there was this age difference, there was very much an even playing field. He liked the fact that she was educated and smart and social and savvy and politically active. I mean, she couldn't have done any of those things if he had not been supportive of that, right? So.
Do you want to mention Bertha Palmer's connection to everyone's favorite dessert?
Oh, the brownie. Oh, yeah. How did I make a whole movie about it without the brownie? Thank you for asking. That's a great question. So during the World's Fair, she went to her bakery chef at the Palmer House Hotel and said, I need a dessert. I need something that women can eat that won't, you know, get all crumbly and what have you. So the brownie was discovered. My neighbor at one point made it for me, the original recipe. It was very dense, very butter forward. But yes, she invented the brownie, or her bakery chef. Yeah, they do sell them at the hotel.
As a sidelight, first of all, the castle was at 1550 North Lakeshore Drive.
Thank you.
And which is a high rise right now.
It's a high rise, yes.
Years ago, and I believe it was maybe in the 50s, an aunt and uncle of mine, maybe it was 60, anyway, an aunt and uncle of mine purchased Bertha Palmer's dining room set.
Wow.
It was
so cool.
sort of a high-end historical Goodwill sale.
Oh my God, can you imagine?
And so somebody called my aunt and said, oh, well, this is for sale, and would you like it? Well, of course she wanted it. And when it was opened all the way, I believe it sat 20 people.
That makes sense.
So they had to have a house that was big enough, and sure enough, they did. It's still in the family, owned by a cousin, one of the daughters of this aunt and uncle.
Wow,
So
that's beautiful.
it was beautiful. I ate a couple dinners there, but Bertha wasn't around.
Well, maybe she was. Maybe the ghost of Bertha was around. Who knows? Who knows?
I believe you mentioned at one time that Potter Palmer and Marshall Field and Leiter were in business together. Marshall Field bought the other two out. Was there any acrimony involved in terms of what direction the business was supposed to go?
Yeah.
Or was it a normal business
I think
transaction?
when Palmer left, it was acrimonious. I believe between Field and Leiter, it was not. I think from what I remember from my research, I don't think Field was a really great guy, if I'm being honest, just from what little bit of research I've done about him. I believe Field pushed Levi out of the business. I think that they did it didn't end well between those two, but Palmer at the time was ready to turn over the business, so I don't think there was any issue there, other than, like Sally said, I think when we think of modern day retail and shopping, I think a lot of things are credited to Field that Potter started and that Field actually was trying to do away with. This whole idea of customer service, returns, that kind of thing, and then had to bring them back, and probably gets more credit for that than necessarily he didn't really come up with it. And I think at one point I read that they told him to put his name on the Field Museum, you need to do some good works with your money, you need to do this, where I think Potter and Bertha had more of a, inclination to do social works and good things, where I think Field, I remember them like kind of twisting his arm and saying like, you need to do this, you need to like put money back into the city in some way. So.
Do you have any knowledge about any of the descendants? Are there, Bertha came from a large family of 6, I believe you said?
Yeah.
So there may be grandchildren, great-grandchildren?
Yeah, I don't really know. Other than Potter, he's since deceased since I made the movie. He's passed. So I was really lucky that I had the opportunity to interview him when I did. I really don't have much knowledge of her descendants and where they landed. I always kind of get a kick out of when I drive, there's like there's like streets named after Potter and Bertha, which I sort of love seeing that. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't know much about the descendants.
What was the moment you realized that this story had to be told?
Well, stories for me kind of sort of gestate for a really long time, and they sort of kind of keep coming back and keep coming back. And I had read a book that is no longer in publication about her, and I studied art history in my undergrad and studied 18th and 19th century art and architecture, and didn't really know of her. She was sort of not even a footnote, I think, in all the studying that I had done. And I just sort of was like, I'm from Chicago, I have an undergrad in art history, how did I not know who this person was? There's this hotel, like, why don't we know of this woman? And then it just kept going, and then I always start with research first. I'm a research nerd, and then from there, like the story starts coming together. But for me, it was gonna be like a big budget. It was going to be called Courting Bertha. It was going to be about their love story. It was going to take place like fire and all this stuff. So I had this big dream of telling this big blockbuster film love story, and then the research for that ended up being the documentary. So, and who knows, maybe I'll make that movie one day. Who knows?
Well, I want to thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.